My problem when I was, let's say, 18 or 19 years old was that I did not want to, quote, become a poet or become a writer, because I wanted to become a painter. And I worked really hard at painting. I drew hours a day. I painted off until 2 or 3 in the morning. I had had a year studying painting in Rome after high school at the Belle Arti, and then I went back to Yale, and I was a painting fine arts major there, and there was a very serious art school at Yale. And that's how I saw myself, and that's what I knocked myself out to do. But I was always reading and writing too, with a quiet passion. I didn't set out to write poems. I didn't, quote, want to write poems. I didn't want to publish poems. I didn't want to put a book together. Those were not my ambitions. But the poems came, they were just sometimes, as I said, appearing in my sketchbook. When I sat down to draw a Romanesque sculpture at the Abbey, the Basilica of Saint-Benoît in the Loire Valley, where I had gone to see where Max Jacob had lived, and I found myself writing poems, almost as if by dictation from the ghost of Max Jacob. And that's just an example. I couldn't suppress it. It was a tremendous inner struggle between writing and painting. And then it was quite almost against myself that when I came back from that summer in France, came back to the United States, and I remember showing those poems to John Palmer, who was, at that time, because I was an undergraduate at Yale then, and he was my dean, and he said he loved them and he wanted to publish them. And that put me in a kind of crisis of thinking, oh Lord, what's happening now? But that makes it sound easy. It's not as if poetry just flowed out of me unconsciously. I had been working at poems since I was 12 years old, because I had loved poetry when I was a child in the French lycée. We had to memorize hundreds of lines of French poetry, and then I loved Latin poetry when I was, again, in high school and studying Catullus and Virgil and Horace. I absolutely adored Latin poetry, and I tried to write English poems in those years that were modeled on Latin poetic forms, verse forms. I had been working at the disciplines of poetic organization for years. I don't want anyone to think that these poems just came unbidden. But it was a work that was somehow not tied to ambition. It was not tied to ambition to be public about it. It was a formal instinct. I don't know how else to describe it. It was an instinct. It was the same to me as when I was a little girl. I loved to make complicated, I can't say snowmen because I made snow creatures. I remember making a sphinx out of snow. I worked for hours on it till my hands were blue with cold, but I just had to get this sphinx right.